Hi Stampers, I'm Pat Fairless and I am part of Jackie Bolheise's Clump and Stompers team. And for the month of August, I am her featured stamper. I created 4 cards with the Heron Habitat bundle. And today I'm going to show you how I created the watercolor scene on one of those cards. I'm very new to making videos, so please be patient as I try to do this today. And let's go ahead and get started with the watercoloring. I'm going to bring in my Stamparatus. Usually when I use watercolor paper, because there's some texture on the background, I like to use the Stamparatus to make sure that I get a nice clean stamp. And if I have to stamp again, it's easy to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I have his feet covered because you can see here that he's standing in water, so I don't really want to be able to see his feet. I want it to look like his feet are submerged. So I've covered his feet with some masking tape, and I'm going to use black StazOn to ink him up. And then the key thing, which I've done many times, is to not forget to remove the masking, because if you don't remove it, you got a real stamping mess. So, all right, let's see if we need to do them more than once or if once will be sufficient. Yeah, he needs a little more ink, doesn't he? So we'll mask his feet again and go ahead and ink him up good. Great thing about the Stamparatus, you can do this multiple times if you have to. That off. Give him a good press. Let it sit there for a couple seconds or so to try to get the ink to transfer. It's not super critical. The main thing is to get his legs, because I'm going to be covering his body with a cutout anyway, so the body isn't as important as the legs, but that looks a lot better. So let's go ahead and use that, and I'll set my Stamparatus aside and bring out my watercolor painter and my ink, and I'm going to lay this other card here so you can kind of see what I'm doing as I do it, I hope. So the first thing I'm going to color are the green areas. So I'm using Granny Apple Green to do that. And I've got a little ink in my lid. You can also use a block to pick up some ink. I like to use the lid because I can add some water to it a little bit easier to help control the amount of color I have. So I'm going to start with this larger area over here and just kind of come in and scribble in some grass. We're not going to be real picky about this. We're just going to kind of make the area green, and then we'll come back and add some layers to get a little bit more dimension and texture to the area. And remember, everyone is going to look different, so no sweating whether it looks like the one you're trying to copy, right? So now I'm going to pick up a little bit of the darker color, test it over here. If I need to bring in a little water, I can, so it's not too dark. And just come back and add a few streaks of a little bit darker. And you can see that gives it a little bit more dimension. We'll probably let that dry and even come back and add a little bit more. Now I'm going to work on this tree line over here. You can see that hopefully. All I did was take my watercolor painter and kind of work it up and down. Now this tree line is meant to look like it's in the distance, so I don't want to make it too tall, because I want to make it sure it looks like it's kind of far away. But you want some variation in the heights. Trees are different heights. Should it be a little longer? Maybe. I don't know. That looks pretty good, I would say. So let's call that good. It's always handy to have a little dish of water that you can clean your brush good when you're changing colors. And a paper towel to kind of dry your brush tip a bit. By the way, I am using the medium brush tip in our set of 3 water painters. Now this one, I'd like a little bit more color variation back here in the grass. So I'm going to come and I'm just going to grab a little bit of the darker ink and mix it in with some water over here. And come back and very lightly just add a little more water, I think. My brush is, I cleaned it too well. I got it dry. Just add a very little more green. So you can see that gives it a little bit more depth, right? Same thing on the trees. If I need to come back and add a little bit darker, I can. If you get it too dark, the nice thing with the watercolor paper is you can always come back and wet your brush with just use water and lighten it up a little bit. But it's easier to start to light and add color than it is to try to lighten it up later. So now we're going to add some water and some sky, and I've got Pool Party ink that I'm going to start with. I used both Pool Party and Pacific Point. Again, I'm starting with the light color. It's like I said, it's always easier to darken than to lighten. So I'm mixing in some Pool Party from my color here, and you can see I've got it pretty watered down and pretty light. And then I'm just going to come in and do some scribbles. Nothing very precise or exact or careful about this. In fact, you get too careful and you play with it too much. Sometimes it looks better if you just don't overthink it and you just come in and make, like I said, scribbles. So I'm going to kind of blend behind him into the grass a little bit. And because it stays on, I can go right through his legs without having to worry about the black ink blending or washing in or... So continue on down to the bottom until we get this now. That's pretty much scribbled, right? You should uneven the edges a little bit. I maybe got it too equal here and there, so just bring some out in some different areas to make it look a little less straight and even all the way down. I'll just bring some out. And then I'm going to come back with the Pool Party and in spots add some more color. Just where you might think there's shadows. So if I, in my mind, I think if the sun's coming here from the top right piece of my card, then the shadows are going to be behind him. And that's where I would want to add some, perhaps a little darker color. And since I'm covering up this body, I don't really have to be too careful if I get color in the Heron. That's fine, because he's going to get covered up anyway. So, okay, couple little dark streaks maybe down here in the bottom. And let's add a little darkness here and there in the sky. I need a little more water in my brush. See how that helps blend it if I just squeezed out a little water? I didn't even really have to go add any more color. Okay, I think that's good with the Pool Party. Sometimes you just have to quit because there is a tendency to like, just want to keep coloring and coloring. And if you overdo it too much, pretty soon it all looks pretty much the same. One little hint I want to share or show you, if you look right in here, you can see how there's some kind of irregularities. That's okay, because it could be waves, but if you don't like that, it's because the paper is textured, and if the brush is slightly dry, then it just stays on the top bumps of the paper. So you can always come back with some water just on your brush and see how that smooths that out just a bit. You get rid of that look. If it's too textured, you don't want to look like you're looking at the texture of the watercolor paper, right? You want it to look like the water may have some texture due to waves, but not necessarily look like the paper. So, all right, I'm going to call that good with Pool Party, and I'm going to go over to use my Pacific Point. Now, Pacific Point, we know, is quite a bit darker than Pool Party. So I'm just going to pick up a little, and again, this is probably I'm going to use this more down in the water than I do in the sky. I want to keep my sky fairly light. And I'm just going to come in a few places. Again, maybe in the shadowed areas, come in underneath his body, between his legs down here where it's going to be in the shadow, behind him. And if you get too much, just squeeze some water. If you think you got it too dark, just squeeze some water till it's clear, and then just kind of brush it. You can also use a paper towel to pick up some of the color if you want. See how that picked up quite a bit of the color right there, where I felt like maybe I had just a little too much. You have to be careful you don't take too much away. Okay, so let's add some color down here. Kind of fun just to play, but sometimes I have to tell myself, so stop playing. You're overdoing it. All right, let's call that good. Do I need some up here? I don't know. Anything. I might just try to pull a little of this Pool Party. What do you think? Enough? All right, let's call that good. So that completes our watercoloring. Pretty quick and simple, right? Now, before we go to the next step, where we're going to add some cattails over here, we really want to make sure that this is pretty dry. I'm just going to wave it around a bit to get it dry. I could hit it with my heat gun. I didn't use a lot of water, so it's not bad. It's actually fairly dry, so I think we're good to go. I need some birds up here, so while I have my StazOn handy, I have my StazOn handy, but I don't have my birds handy. Oh, my birds on a little block here. And let's just add our birds up here. Good enough. All right, now I'm going to show you how I did the cattails. And you could do this one of two ways. You could take your markers, a Granny Apple Green marker and a Crumb Cake marker, and just color in your complete stamp. The green on the bottom stems and the little grassy area down here, and the Crumb Cake on the top. But I found a way I like better. And what I like to do, sometimes I don't get a very good stamp or inking when I do it with my 100% with my markers. So what I like to do is just to ink the complete stamp with the ink that I'm using the most of, and in this case it's mostly Granny Apple Green. So my stamp is now fully inked with Granny Apple Green, and I'll come back with a damp paper towel, and in this case it's extremely easy to just wipe off those two cattails. And then I can take my crumb cake marker and color the two cattails. I think it's quicker and easier, but you do what's best for you. So now we're going to add some of these in here, just kind of randomly. Now you want to clean your stamp between, because you don't want to put your crumb cake cattails in your green ink pad if you can help it. So just clean it all and then redo it with the Granny Apple Green. And I think I put 3 sets of cattails on here. So here's set number 2. And we will stick it so it's in a little bit different location than the first one. Let's try that. Guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to ink my cattails. So the easy way to fix that is you now just take your marker and you draw your cattail in. No worries. Cattails are easy to draw. And if you didn't want to do that, you could actually just leave the cattails off and just have some extra grass. That's fine too. Okay, see, no worries. So let's do one more. I'll see if I can do it the right way this time. I'm gonna ink the whole thing up. Clean it off. And if you get ink on the edges, it's easy to clean that off too. Okay. Now my marker. Try not to forget the marker this time. I've had lots of practice drawing cattails. That wasn't the first time I forgot to fill them in. Okay, let's do one more set right about here. And that's good. That's enough cattails. Now, the one thing I want to go back and add just a touch with the pool party and maybe the Pacific Point is around the heron's legs. We could have what we might want to look like a little bit of ripples. So we can kind of just go in and make some circles, just to make it look a little bit more like there's ripples around his feet. Okay, and you could do that with the pool party too, but I think I'm gonna let it go. I think it's good the way it is. At some point, just say good is enough. All right, so now I said I was going to pop up his body a bit, so I wasn't real worried how this was stamped. And I have that done already, so I'm gonna put him on here with dimensionals. And I probably should have a little dimensional behind his head. Sorry for reaching. I'll just cut one of these tiny dimensionals in half so I can get something up here on his head. And you can also see here his legs. I left only a little bit of them. I could have In reality, I could have just cut all of his feathers straight across. I didn't really need to fussy cut those because he's stamped behind here, so that would show anyway. So if you don't like fussy cutting, you can just cut the feathers right off, or alternatively, you could use the coordinating die to cut him out and then cut off his feet. The die will leave a slight white area border around the whole heron, and I wanted him to look like he was more right part of the scene. I didn't want to see that white border, so that was why I chose to fussy cut. But it's up to you. If you hate fussy cutting, then just use the die, or don't fussy cut the feathers, just cut them off and the stamp from behind will show through. All right, so now all we have left is we're going to add him to our mat. And for some reason, I have much better luck aligning up mats if I do them horizontally than if I do them vertically. I don't know why that is, but it's what works for me. So I line them up horizontally. And then this is popped up with dimensionals on my basic like card base. So I'm going to add some dimensionals back here. And I probably used too many, but use however many you like. All right, and once again, it's easier for me if I lay it this way. I also got this camera right in my nose, so that doesn't help. Okay, looks pretty good. All right, so now all I need is the sentiment, right? And I didn't think you needed to watch me stamp a sentiment, and you definitely did not need to see me tie a bow. So I have that pre-made, and I will stick a couple dimensionals on the back of that. And put him on the card. The sentiment is from the Heron Habitat stamp set. This die is a cute little die that's part of the Heron dies. There's another one that's very similar. You can see it's got a little heart here on the end. Isn't that cute? Which gives you a little opening to attach your little silver cord from Simply Elegant Trim. So that's it. That is my card. Now, I will show you the inside. I have it finished. I just added a simple cattail on here. I didn't think you needed to have me show you make that. So I hope you like this card. I hope you learned a little bit of something about watercoloring. And again, thanks to Jackie for having me share this with you. Thank you. Have a great day.